So we're going to get started on today's seminar. DJ was gracious enough to give us some of his time so that you guys could learn a little bit about his time coaching Team India, perhaps maybe even a little bit about his own experiences at WSDC. In case there are any of you that haven't met DJ before, DJ is a World School's top speaker, no mean feat, certainly. 2 years ago, I believe now, was also a finalist himself, and was one of the coaches for Team India who were the champions last year, much to the distress of the Canadians who lost on a unanimous decision in said final. And even as much as my Canadian pride might make me wish that they had won, it was indeed a fair decision. That being said, DJ is going to go over basically his own experiences and tell you guys a little bit about the experience coaching and participating in WSDC. I know that many of you are probably fairly interested in that, but in terms of the structure, we're going to let DJ speak for a little while. He's going to work through his presentation. Then we'll have a question and answer period. Now, you guys will learn a little bit about DJ's experiences, but before we even get started, a bit of a round of applause for DJ for giving us a chance.
Okay, thank you, Ben. This is essentially a short summary of what the World Schools Debating Championships is. Just to get an idea, how many of you in the room have heard of WSDC before? Just raise your hand. How many of you are enrolled in some debate class at LinkedKey here right now? Okay, cool. Those are good numbers. Now you can see from over here that the World Schools Debating Championship is without a doubt the single most competitive tournament in the entire world. This is, like, you look at the number of participating countries, there are very few tournaments that have this many countries participating. Importantly, this tournament has a very, very rich history and is older than many of the countries that are actually participating in this tournament itself. So it is without a doubt the most competitive, and it is also the most prestigious. So for reference, if anyone is aware of the World Universities Debating Championship, that is the most prestigious debating championship across all age levels. The people who win that often did really well at the World Schools Debating Championship. The age group for when you're allowed to apply and participate there's no real age gap. It's more of you have to technically be enrolled in high school. So overall that means that if you're in 8th grade, you're eligible to compete more or less all the way up to your final year of high school, right? So I know a lot of people who, and especially I think Canada as well, starts picking people fairly young. So if you show promise when you're in the 10th grade or even when you have up to 3 years left to graduate, they could select you. Team India does an extremely similar thing where we pick up people who are basically children, kidnap them and send them to Thailand to do a debate. That's essentially what it's like. So overall, World Schools Debating Championship is the place to be if you want high school debating. So India overall actually has an extremely recent history in the World Schools Debating Championship. As you can see, 2008 was the first year in which we sent a team. We were pathetic. I think we won exactly one debate, and that too on a walkover, maybe. We overall had no clue how to debate. We really didn't have any coaches, and a couple of our speakers had a lot of problems speaking English as well. From then you can see we slowly started rising up, and eventually India grew as a team that eventually got to be feared. So 2016 is when I came in. This was my first year debating for Team India, and together we sort of won the Asian World Schools Championship, which was held in Thailand at the time, and that is like around this time we started doing really well. Importantly, Indian coaches are often the only people who actually teach India. So the sum amount of pay that I received for all of my coaching for Team India was $0 at the end of it. Almost all of it was just for compensation for my travel or for all my expenditure. We have a model of once you've actually been trained by this society, you have a duty to come back and then start coaching again. So in 2008, that first team that we sent, the person who was the best on that team became our coach in 2014. In 2016, the person who was the best in 2013 became the coach. And similarly, I was the best in 2018, and 2019 I became one of the main coaches involved. So using that model, India has overall grown bit by bit, and we've gotten much bigger. Also, we've expanded. So we started with only having 5 schools and only doing selections in 1 city, and we've expanded upwards to a lot of schools and many, many cities. So the parallel here is that Canada was actually very similar. At one point in time, Canada had very regional, you could only get selected if you had regional supremacy in a way. There were very few areas. People only came from Ontario, or then eventually they included places like Vancouver, but it was very restrictive. From what I've heard now, Canadian selections have also gotten slightly more democratic, and so regardless of where you are, you have an ability to join, and it's a different process for them, but it's definitely something that is available to every single person in that place. So, looking overall at how exactly the Indian system works, I'm hoping I can give you an idea of what my experience was like and what the organization is like and how we try to work. Essentially, we've been doing this for this 11 years, and our idea is we live in a country where debating is not spread at all. Most of you in this room, if you've been to some sort of debate class before, already know more debating than the top 100 debaters in India right now. Because India has a very, very bad culture of, we just haven't had exposure to parliamentary debating before. So the primary thing that we try to do is just to reach students, to reach them, to teach them how to understand English in the debating point of view and how to actually voice their ideas up and about. So that's overall what they try to focus on. This is the World Schools 2019 team, and this picture is actually where I want to spend most of my time because there are so many good stories in this picture on itself. So if you look over here, this in the center, this demon, his name is Tejas. Tejas was the best speaker of World Schools 2019, making India the only country in the past 9 years to get 2 back-to-back best speakers. Importantly though, he has another year left, which means that he's only in 11th grade and could come back again. The most fascinating thing though is if you see over there, he's sitting on a wheelchair. Each and every one of his speeches he gave with a broken leg. And if you watch any of the videos that Team India has, you can see one of his coaches or one of his teammates wheeling him up to the podium every single time he had to speak. And the thing is, he can walk usually, it's just the boy fell down a bus during the tournament and completely broke his ankle. And he's actually still in crutches right now, 6 months after the tournament is over. So that was the first thing that happened to us. The second thing, if you look to his right, there's a boy named Bhavya. If you feel like he's not looking at the camera directly, it's because he's blind. He is 100% blind. He cannot see shapes, he cannot see figures, he cannot see anything at all. And if you're thinking, just think for a second and imagine when you've debated before, how much you rely on your ability to see. How much you've relied on your ability to write down on a piece of paper what your points are, to communicate with your teammates like that. How much you've relied on looking at the judge's face and judging their reaction. How much you've relied on being able to use eye contact in order to actually be persuasive. This kid had absolutely none of that. He had to, and this is how he takes notes. He writes on a laptop that actually gives the audio that he writes back to him through his headphones. The thing is though, that means he has to listen to his laptop and also listen to the other speakers at the exact same time and process these 2 different pieces of audio at the same time. That is another thing which he really had to deal with. So overall, this Team India was actually one of the most disadvantaged teams possible. We had 2 kids who needed help climbing up to the stage alone. But overall, what it shows is that whenever you're working with any sort of disability, even on a massive scale like this, you still have the ability, if you put effort, to overcome it. So Bhavya over there, who was the person who was visually impaired completely, he ranked 6th in the entire world, the only speaker with a visual disability to come even close to the top 50, and that's just a phenomenal performance, because actually, I can nearly promise this to you, if you've been debating for over 6 months, he has had less debating experience than all of you. Because he had no clue what debating was, just joined because he thought it might be fun, and then he got trained and went up to the final stage. Overall, that's how the Indian model works. We have to take in children who have disabilities, who have disadvantages, and who don't have any experience in debate, and then the objective is to mold them into it. So I guess the question then is, how do we do it? If you see over there, that's Hemant in that blue shirt over there. Next to him is Saiga. This is me in an extremely bad picture pose. This is another coach, Dhruva. This is a coach called Kenza, in the middle there. This was the main coaching team for 2019. And like I said earlier, you can clearly see the alumnus model over here. Because both me, Hemant, and also Dhruva were all members of Team India. And importantly, Saika over there is sort of, I guess, a fairy godmother for all debating in India. She was the one who trained every single person in this picture, and overall, that was the way that we basically came up together, which is the training process is absolutely rigorous. Essentially, it is around 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day for 1.5 months in person. So during the summer vacation, every single day the kids come to a common center in one city, and you have around 12 to 13 hours of just constant debating. You're also forced, like I say forced, but the kids really like it. I liked it myself when I was doing it. You're also supposed to do lots of research when you're at that center over there. And with that, you get better at prepared topics, you get better at everything. Importantly, you get a better worldview in general. So that's the type of training regimen that we do. It's extremely intensive. We start selecting our team all the way in December, and for the next 6 months, we have at least once a week debates online, and we have mandatory research tasks. Then after that, 1.5 months of 13 hours a day. That's the way that Team India trains, and that's the reason that you saw that graph of Team India getting better, because that's the amount of rigor you have to put in if you want to be good at anything. Debating is no exception. Overall, that's what the WSDC experience was over here. In terms of what we achieved that year, Team India actually achieved something no team has done before this year, which is in a power pair tournament. What a power pair tournament is a tournament where all the teams that you face are teams that are as good as you, if not better. In that tournament format, we managed to drop only one ballot across around 48 different ballots. What that means is we met 48 different judges throughout all of our rounds throughout the tournament, and only one of them voted against us. We never lost a single round, and in the final we did beat Canada, like Brent was saying so sorrowfully. We did beat Canada unanimously over there. Also, one thing to note is that in 2018, when I was at World Schools, I had a final against Team China, and I lost on a 5-4 split. Extremely sad stuff. I promise we should have won. But even if they didn't agree with us at that time, in 2019 we got our revenge. We faced the same Team China in our semi-final and beat them unanimously there. So overall, Team India had an extremely good 2019, and the experience that I'm giving you is just the achievements, but the thing that makes it really nice is the journey. It's actually forming bonds with every single person over here, the wonderful stories that you have, and that is what happens when you go for an international debating tournament. It's not just the achievements, it's not just winning that you look forward to, it's the process of learning, and it's the process of seeing different people of different cultures. You have to understand different accents and learn how to deal with that. You have to look at different arguments that people from everywhere around the world would make and realize that their perspective is different and learn how to deal with all of that. Overall, this is what the international debate tournament looks like. It's an experience that can really change your life, and if any of you have an opportunity to try for one, I really do recommend that you try to go for it. Now, what I'm going to do now is essentially talk about how we select, how we train, what it takes to get onto a national squad for Team India, and how that applies to you guys right now. So there are 3 key things that we try to do. So we try to spread a culture of debating, we try to then select the national squad and then train them, right? So the good thing is, in Canada, you do not need to spread a culture of debating. It's already there. I swear, the types of Canadian high school tournaments that you see over here, it's a luxury that you may not realize isn't true in the vast majority of the world. So in India, for example, there is only one high school debate tournament in the entire of the country. And that high school debate tournament started 2 years ago. That's it. There's absolutely nothing else. And so that culture of debating is something that you guys already have given to you. So then selecting the national squad is the part that actually is applicable to you guys and how it might work. So India and Canada are very similar in that they are huge countries. Also, there are pockets of population all around. One thing that we do, which is slightly different from the way Canada does it, is that we have one central organization doing tryouts all over the place. And so we go to children all over the place, we listen to their speeches, we conduct workshops for them, show them what a Prime Minister's speech is, and then see what their speech is like. Overall, this is the process of just collecting and getting talent. What we look for is not someone who is polished, not someone who is good. Instead, what we look for is someone who is willing to learn and someone who has potential. The reason for that is especially true at your guys' age. The important thing is not to be sort of good or slightly better than everyone else in your class. The objective for you guys should be essentially to try to learn as much as possible or to try to soak up as much knowledge as you can. And so that's what we look for when we're trying to select someone on the national squad, because that's what matters more. When you're in 8th grade or 9th grade, it's more about whether you can learn, it's more about whether you have potential than how good you are right now. Overall, that's what Team India's selection in terms of geography is like. Then we have a national camp. The national camp is extremely interesting because it just shows how different the Indian system is from the way that it works over here. So the national camp is the top 48 to 54 students in the entire country. Out of these 54 students, almost all of them are somewhere between their 9th grade to their 12th grade. I guarantee you, there are at least 20 of them who can't make more than a 3-minute speech. The reason for that is because we prioritize getting people who have never had opportunities before moving into these top 50 people. So regions that are slightly poorer, we make sure that we take children from there even if they weren't that good. Regions that have not had access to debate, we try to put them in there. What I want to point out to you guys is basically this. When I stepped into national camp, I was older than all of you, I was much worse than all of you. What that means is that it's quite simple in terms of the only difference in terms of how anyone in this room who's considering debating could become a best speaker at the most competitive high school tournament is you just need to care. You just need to try. And if you try a small and consistent effort every single week or every single month, that is enough to actually push yourself through and get to a high level. Because these children who enter this national camp, these 50 students, very few of them actually know a polished form of debate. The vast majority of them are taught debate during these 5 days, and after that once they make the team or they make a development team. So, like I said, we focus on potential. We don't focus on polished products because potential is what actually takes you further. Your willingness to learn and your willingness to put in effort. Overall, that's what the selection process is. Lastly, we look at the training and the way that the training happens. So, I think over here is a fair representation of, over the past 2 years alone, what the ISDS has been doing. So, if you see over there, you have the ICYD. Has anyone heard of ICID? No? Expected that. So, essentially, ICID is a tournament that happens in the UK every single year. It's called the International Championship for Young Debaters. It's basically something that is actually restricted to likely the age group of people in this room. It's between 7th grade to 10th grade, right? How many of you are actually within that range? 7th grade to 10th grade. Yeah, so almost all of the people over there are your age. And this is meant for people of that caliber, right? Or in terms of that age group. That is the most competitive junior tournament in the entirety of the world. So, if you would think, and that also luckily is in the British parliamentary format, which is the format that we teach you over here. So, for example, if you were interested in considering an international tournament of that sort, this is something that you could consider. The thing that's really special about this is we sent a team for the first time from India to that tournament, and on the first time that they tried it, our speaker finished first, our next speaker finished second, and they won the entire tournament without losing a single round. That speaker over there is the same Demon Tejas, who is now the best speaker of 2019. Overall, in terms of how that tournament went, objectively at that time, he was slightly, if not marginally better than what I see in the average of the classes of these days, right? Once again, his coach was the only one who actually pushed him to move forward over there. So if there's one thing to take away from this, it's simple. International debate tournaments can be wonderful and life-changing, and the way that you make them work is that you have to work for it. And if you work for it, and if you are actually interested in growing as a debater, there's nothing that you can't reach. The highest of the highs in terms of high school debating is right in front of you there, right? So, in terms of all of these, every single one of these is a major achievement that the Indian Schools Debating Society has had. Over here you see the Oldham Cup, which is a Singaporean tournament. For those who don't know, Singaporeans are absolutely insanely good at debating. Singapore is one of the most overpowered countries in terms of debating. Every year they are a team to be feared. The Oldham Cup is a tournament in Singapore, which means that it is another one of the most deathly tournaments that we could actually have. That is an extremely competitive one where we sent a team that had just started debating out together. They reached the semi-final, which is a great job over there. This is 2018 when me, Hemant and the rest of our team made the final against Team China. Overall, it's a slow progression over here, but the one thing is clear. The common elements of giving back to help the community that you grew from and also trying to grow within as a student is the only thing that led to all of this happening. And that's the only thing that led to the final panel here, which is, I think this is our reaction after learning that we beat Team China, and this is me and Kenza trying to steal the best speaker trophy from Tejas. Very easy to do since he's in a wheelchair. Overall, overall that's what the WSDC experience was like. Lastly, I just want to talk about Canada because it is the most relevant to you guys. On the left over there is Team India receiving their trophy. On the right is Team Canada receiving their trophy. Does anyone recognize anyone in this picture?
Max Rosen.
Yeah, Max Rosen.
We have Max Rosen. Who else?
Naomi.
Naomi.
Angela.
Angela. There are two more. Actually, I don't know the other two. I'm relying on you guys here. But yeah, okay. So they made the finals. They did really well. They got smacked in the finals. No apologies. But essentially, Team Canada is also one of the most fearsome WSDC teams. If you guys don't know, 2015 Team Canada was in the final. 2016 Team Canada was in the final. And now again, 2019 Team Canada was in the final. Also, 2017 Team Canada was in the quarterfinal. So every single year in the past 4 to 5 years, they've been a dominant team. Also, in this Team Canada, only one of them or two of them has actually passed out. So there are at least 3 people trialing again. It's going to be a wonderful team to be a part of, right? The important thing though is that all of them are approaching their final year, which means there's a gap and there's an opening for a member who's young, right? What I'm trying to imply over here is next year, this could be one of y'all. And I'm not even kidding. It's the people who in Canada and Canadian high schools you maybe revere or you maybe think are extremely invincible, 1 year ago maybe were relatively where you guys are. The question is just, when you are, if you want to consider trialing, what do you have to show? And I think that's what all of these slides that I just portrayed before you are. The way that, okay, I'm not fully familiar with the system in Canada, but the way that it works over here, to my knowledge, is you go for individual selection tournaments, you give speeches over there, and you get ranked. And then you make a team of 10, and they call that Team Canada. Then they train those teams of 10, and eventually they pick the top 5, right? That's overall how it works. That is something that is definitely possible for everyone. The issue is just, can you put the effort to getting into that top 10, show yourself as someone who has potential, who's willing to learn, and that would be enough to get you into the top 5. And once you get into that top 5, this is what you do have waiting for you. Because Team Canada has done wonderfully in the past in terms of speaker tabs. While this year they got a little bit snubbed from speaker awards. In the past couple of years, last year Naomi was the 6th best speaker, I think, and Andrew Yoon, also from Canada, was also a 6th best speaker. So overall, Canada is a powerful team. Being part of them in terms of a WSDC experience can change your life. And if you don't actually care about changing your life, it can change your university applications for sure. And What I mean by that is, let's simply look over here and go over the universities that we have. This kid over here, okay, so the only two people who passed out are the two of us. I wanted to go to U of T, I am now at U of T, but Hemant over here wanted to go to Princeton. Unfortunately, they didn't get to go to Princeton. Instead, they got a full scholarship to Harvard, they got a full scholarship to Yale, they also got a full scholarship to Cornell, they got into Duke without a full scholarship, they got into Oxford but rejected Oxford, Berkeley was their safety school, and this was before they actually started trying. Over here, our coach, Dhruva, is currently a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford, which is essentially a full scholarship in Oxford, and before that, they were at Harvard on a full scholarship, after rejecting Princeton, after rejecting Yale. And the main thing that these two had was debating. The main thing that these two had were the experiences that you came out over there. Because trust me, when you go abroad to an international tournament, the essays that you can write are beautiful. The essays that you can write on the experience that you have over there. I guarantee you that these three kids who are graduating this year, they are going to smash the applications. And the reason for that is if you really do care about that, universities value you showing that you actually have the effort and you have merit, but importantly, that you get some level of exposure, that you've seen different places in the world, you've seen different types of people. This is an activity that can get you that. And anyone over here, like over there, that boy, Harvard, the Cornell full scholarship, that kid, Oxford, right? Anyone who I can point to over here has either been to a major Ivy or got their dream university. The reason for that is because if you shoot for the top in the field of debating, and if you make it, then you can absolutely use it not just to change your life in a personal sort of way, but to change your path in life, in terms of university applications, in terms of all of this, right? Overall, that's all I have to present for today. Do we have any questions? Yeah?
So you said when you select some members, you look their potential and also their effort, right? How much work they want to do. So how during like a weekly class, how you can see, their effort because you have camp, right? Few days camp. If they do weekly here, how you can see their potential and effort.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's actually a really good question because it's something that we've gotten asked a little bit individually by some people here. The way to show that you're putting in that effort or that you actually have that potential is essentially to show that you're listening. So write down feedback and remember it. Next time you give a speech, make sure you fix the mistake that you made last time. Even if you make 2 new mistakes, make sure you're trying, right? I think that's overall the idea over there. Make sure that when you make a mistake and someone points it out, you don't make that mistake the next time. Or you try as hard as possible. So if you make a mistake of, let's see, I don't want to pick an example that's too specific. So say you use an example in a debate that was slightly too broad and you didn't explain how the example matters for the debate. And that's what your feedback was. Next time when you use an example, make sure that you explain how the example matters to the debate. It's small things like that. One by one, implementing feedback. Over 5 days, it's really hard and we have to keep track of the way kids are implementing feedback. We actually have an Excel sheet where we track which feedback has been given to which kids and whether they do it in the next debate or not. And we use that for elimination. So if you were thinking of how you could do it on a week by week basis, it's not a hard thing to do. Write down what you've done wrong, write down what you apparently did right, try to do more of the good things and less of the bad things. Thank you. Any other questions?
As a debater, what kind of information or knowledge do you need to get or accumulate from your daily life?
Thank you. Yeah, so it's in terms of what kind of knowledge you would need to be a debater, that is, it's such a wide set of things that it's extremely useful to just read the news, extremely useful to be aware of the world around you. In terms of what being a debater tells you for your daily life, it actually gives you a lot more. So what debating does for you in terms of your knowledge in the daily life is it gets you to it answers the question, what questions should I be asking? So when you're considering a choice between 2 options, when you're considering to work at a place or not, when you're considering to apply to some university or not, the debating way of thinking is something that can really get you to narrow down your options better. which is just thinking logically, asking if I do this, what will happen? Is it worth it? Why am I doing this thing? Overall, being a debater can get you those answers much better, right? Did I answer your question?
Or what kind of topic usually being chosen in the debate?
So what kind of topic? That's a very good question, and I think the reason is because a couple of topics are more regularly asked. So topics on international relations, for example. For example, should the United States pull out of Syria? Questions on social justice. So should the feminist movement vote for the progressives, or as a feminist, would you actually vote for the NDP? All of these options are different types of motions that are there. Overall, I think social justice, international relations, little bit of economics is overall the topics that get repeated more often, but it could be anything. So there have been university tournaments where the topic has been we prefer to live in a world where there is no such thing as a soulmate, right? So it's an extremely so it's an extremely different set of topics that could be given, and overall it's really hard to prepare for any one of them, but what you could do instead was just read up on the news now and then every single time, and you slowly collect the knowledge you'll need to do mostly anything. Any other questions?
I have another question. If you're a good reader, because you do a lot of research, right? It's going to big help, or?
Yeah, so reading is an extremely good activity to pick up knowledge. Full disclosure, I am actually a very, very bad reader, so I don't read much at all. When I was on the World Schools team, I was the dumbest kid on the team and everyone else was much smarter than me. I just spoke pretty, and so I got away with it. But for most other people, you would have to do some amount of reading. So there are some newspapers that are good reading, you could look at magazines. Overall, just reading books gives you some really good ideas, but reading is something that helps you a lot. It's something that makes your creativity more, and it really helps you become a better debater. If not, just let you communicate your ideas better, which will help you no matter what you're trying to do. Thank you.
Can you give a couple of examples, like what books help you a lot, or what magazines help you a lot?
So the BBC and The Economist The Economist especially is a very good newspaper, because what they do is, in terms of debating, they have ideas for policies, like you would, so for example, The Economist has articles on should we legalize marijuana, and then they have both arguments on it. They have some examples on it as well. So The Economist is a very good source. The BBC is similar. But also it's other magazines like science magazines that talk about different discoveries, right, and ethics of them. So should you be allowed to clone humans is some type of article you might find in a science journal that you won't find in other places. Those sort of things are really good. I think it's hard to point to a specific source because no one source is perfect and no one source has everything. Overall, it's just the type of article or the type of material you should be looking for is this interesting and is this controversial? Is there two sides to this? Is there an opinion over here to be had? If there's an opinion to be had, it could be useful in some debate, in some form anywhere. Any other questions?
You were talking about you have training, very intensive training in 1.5 months, this short time period. Knowledge cannot be trained actually. So, for example, you have to read, right? Then accumulate. So that's what I'm thinking. Is there, say, top 3 skills you're thinking of if you look at the kids' potential? Which is the top 3 or top 4 some skills that you are looking at?
So for potential, the main things that we look at is, number 1, can you think logically? So if someone raises a point, an argument, even if you don't know any examples, even if you don't know where it was done before, if you can think logically and criticize that argument, that's a very good thing, right? Knowledge is something, because before the 1 month of training, we have 6 months of research period. So we can make up for the knowledge. What we can't make up for is logic. That's something that is much harder to teach at a basic level. So what we look for primarily is your ability to logically speak. Another one is your ability to, like I said, your ability to learn. Your ability to humbly take in feedback. So if we give you some criticism, If you start arguing against us and say, actually I'm right, when you're an 8th grader trying to correct some of the best university debaters of all time, you're unlikely to make the team if you do that. So we're looking for humility, we're looking for logical thinking ability, and lastly, we're also looking for some amount of knowledge. So in the national camp, we have quizzes, and when we ask those people quizzes, we actually find out how much you know about the common world. So we'll ask you questions like, who's the president of Zimbabwe? What's happening in South Africa right now, and why does it matter? These are extremely hard quizzes. Most people fail them. But the few students who do pass them clearly show that they're reading the news, clearly show that they're actually involved in the world. So an example for a question that was asked in one of these tests, and is being asked to people of your age, is what is quantitative easing and how did it work in the 2008 financial crisis? That is one of the questions that was asked. And 1/3 of the room answered it correctly. So that is, even if they don't know debating, sometimes they know things. Sometimes they have raw knowledge about the world, and so that is another thing. So if you're looking for the top 3 things, I think those 3 things is what we're looking for.
For the national camp, as a coach, what kind of big or small programs you have introduced to bump up or to build the team? You know, in some of them, they are just newcomers to the team. What kind of programs you normally do for 1.5 months?
So for the 1.5, by the time the 1.5 month has come along, we would have done weeks and weeks of debates with them. The most useful thing in debating is just practice. So we get people from other countries, other national teams to practice with us. So we've done online debates with Canada before we actually met them at the tournament. We've done all of those, and it's just a sense of continuously getting practice on different topics, giving them feedback, making sure they're listening to the feedback and they implement it next time. Just doing that can really help massively. And the thing I think where people lack is sometimes people go for some classes where they do something every single week and it becomes monotonous for them, they don't try to improve. That's the reason why there's stagnation sometimes when you go to a weekly class and maybe you just don't want to improve. That's not the case with these kids because they really want to be there. They've gone through a grueling process where only 5 of them were selected, and you can be sure that if you give them feedback, they're listening and they're trying to implement it. So we just give them as many debates as possible, give them as many drills and activities that they can do on their own, make sure that they submit their homework, but we very rarely have to chase them for it. In fact, very often when we give them homework, they complete it early and they ask us for more of it because they're really trying to improve. So overall, that's what it is. Just give them a couple of assignments here and there and just debate. Practice is the main thing to becoming perfect in debating.
Okay, second question. So English is the second language for all the students, right, from India. So do you also have some special training for them? Because, for example, like accent reduction, those kind of things.
So we actually specifically don't do accent reduction. It's one of the things that we hold very firmly because if you end up speaking overall, you will naturally have some amount of accent reduction. So my accent was much worse 3 years ago. But I'm pretty sure you can tell I still have some amount of an Indian accent now. But what we care about is, can you be clear? If you can be clear, even if you have an accent, we don't care. We don't care because at the end of the day, we think you still should be able to speak properly, and we won't actually take it hard on you if you can't reduce your accent. The reason is because for the kids for whom it is easier to remove their accent, they're likely slightly wealthier, they likely came up with a better family who taught them English. We don't think those should be reasons why you get held back. So some of our best debaters are kids with horrible accents. We just make sure that we fix it enough that they can speak clearly and they can be understood, and after that, we're fine. In terms of the other second language stuff, we try to give them some vocabulary training if they don't have it. We try to give them basic pronunciation if they don't have it. But other than that, what we focus on is talking to them in English as much as possible, interacting with them and using English in the debate environment, and just using that language a lot gets them normalized to it. That's why we try not to speak in our ethnic languages when doing debating activities, even in casual conversation. Even when we're cracking jokes with them, we do it in English. Because then if you get that language instilled in them, they're more likely to be good at it, or more likely to be clear at it.
Sorry, and last question.
Yeah.
From your coaching theories, because you provide lots of feedback to the students, right? Can you give us some specific examples of what are the common issues dealt with, and after you feedback, they got some improvements after that?
So one set of things is just basic things that public speaking needs. So simple speaking things like be louder, be clearer, be more confident when you're speaking. That's the most basic feedback for people who are starting out. And after that, I think it really gets specific to the individual speaker. So in terms of in debating, and it might be slightly more complicated, it's thinking about what you have to prove in the debate and thinking logically, making sure that everything you say is actually proved, instead of you just claiming it or asserting it. That is one big piece of feedback, because very often when I give you a topic, you might have some opinions, but you're not proving it when you're saying it in your speech. So it's about actually proving it to someone who's skeptical about your opinion. That is something that's another big piece of feedback. Those two things, I think, are the overall biggest there. Yeah?
How do you prepare for thinking on the spot?
So you can't prepare on the spot for thinking on the spot. You need to have done it before. So the answer is basically you fail. You try it a couple of times, you try it a couple more, and you mess up. But once you've messed up enough times in practice, you get better at it. The important thing is every time you try to think on the spot and it doesn't work, after that you find out what the right answer was, and you ask yourself, how could I have changed my way of thinking to get to that answer better? And then when you're done with that process, every single time you fail to come up with an answer, especially over here in this environment when you have a coach who can tell you what the right answer was, which is honestly such a blessing. When you have that, if you find out what the correct answer is, you can then reverse engineer and work on how you should be thinking to get yourself to reach that answer. So that's how you think on the spot, by trying, failing, and then eventually getting better at it. Yeah. So I think we're overall, I think we have 5 to 10 minutes left. Yeah, so I'll just take 2 more questions max, and then I think I'll. Yeah.
So you said you have few team members they got in very good university, like top university in USA or in India. So they got full scholarship, right? You think because debating or class they're academic? Or?
So it's definitely both. You just debating won't get you anywhere. If you have bad academics, then academics is the objective most default thing that they go to. But if you look at a top university, what you realize is everyone who applies actually has a near perfect ACT or SAT score. That's not what it's about. It's not about getting a high IB score. Most of the people who I know, who I applied with in my school, had a 43 or 44 IB on 45. It's an extremely high score. The question is then, I did IB as well. Yeah. So the question is, how do you differentiate yourself, right? Because when I applied with the 44 IB, the reason I got in was not because of that score. It is because there was something that set me aside from the other people who are also applying with that number. And that's where debating comes in. So when you can write really good essays, that means that, so the score gets you at the table. It gets them reading your actual application, but the essay is what sets you apart. And the activities is what sets you apart. That's what actually gets them to select you. So it's hard to say why they got selected into Harvard. All I can say is that of all my friends that I know, even though a lot of them had really good grades, this one bunch of debaters is uniquely a group that got into really good universities. So debating must have something to do with it. And I do think it's logical because universities like it, especially international tournaments sometimes are very well reputed. And so debating is a big contributing factor if you can spin it the right way. Yeah. I think we have time for one more question if there's any, and then we should be done. Anyone have a question?
So, public speaking itself can be very nerve-wracking for some people. Not to mention debating in public and, kind of thinking on the spot. Do you have any tricks, tips in terms of how to stay calm and how to...
Yeah, for sure. So public speaking is one of the things that I actually try to deal with really early, and I think debating gets much easier when you just don't get afraid to come up and give a speech to random people. And I think the overall idea is, if you're being afraid of public speaking, just think of it as a conversation with other people and try to just tune the other people out and just focus on that chair. If you look at that chair and just talk to the chair and just look around the room, imagine that you're the only one over there, you're not giving a public speech, you're just talking to yourself but loudly. And if you try to convince yourself in your mind that there's no big deal, you're just talking to a few people, very soon you'll find that you can give a speech to 20 people in a room, and then you can give it to 200, and then you can give it to 2,000 in an auditorium. It's slowly just conditioning your mind to say it doesn't matter if other people are there, I'm here to do something else, and what they think doesn't really matter. What I'm going to do is going to be good regardless. And that's what the public speaking thing is. Overall it takes practice, but also it's mental. It's thinking, how do I actually get over this? How do I tune all of them out and just focus on myself, just focus on my speech. Overall, thank you everyone for coming in here. Thank you for having me.